I was a vegetarian for 36 years. Then this happened. Experience is more important than 1,000 books and training courses. Written and read by Bernhard Kutzler. I was a committed vegetarian for 36 years, the last 10 of which I was almost a vegan. I firmly believed that this was the right diet for me, until my body taught me otherwise. The following is the story of my eating habits. As a child, I grew up with the usual home cooking, that is, with meat, fish, dairy and cereal products, as well as vegetables and fruit. I became a vegetarian when I was 25 years old. It happened like this. I suffered from a chronic sore throat. None of the 5 doctors I consulted over the course of 5 months could help. Finally, a homeopath gave me a remedy, and I ate only salads for 5 weeks. That brought me healing. The scientist in me wanted to know why. So I read books on nutrition and became convinced that the whole food vegetarian diet was good for me. Initially, I felt comfortable with it, even though I was excessively thin. At a height of 5 feet 8, 177 centimeters, I weighed only 121 pounds, 55 kilograms, although I had weighed 132 pounds, 60 kilograms, when I was 18 and was still eating meat. When I ate a lot, I put on 2 to 4 pounds, 1 to 2 kilograms, but as soon as I returned to normal-sized portions, my weight went back to 121 pounds, 55 kilograms. I also had little physical strength. I remained thin and physically weak for 25 years, but otherwise felt well. I was so convinced of this style of eating that I trained as a nutritionist, wrote a book, and gave lectures and seminars. From 2011 onwards, symptoms of physical decline gradually became apparent. It started with a slipped disc, from which I only recovered slowly. In 2017, I had a hernia. There were complications during the operation, and I had to have an emergency operation 3 days later. Again, it took me months to recover. In 2019, my left knee started hurting. At times, I could hardly walk. This was soon followed by pain in my right shoulder. Physiotherapy was unsuccessful for knee and shoulder. To make matters worse, I also had chronic pain in my mouth. My gums were inflamed, and one tooth or another kept hurting. I went to the dentist every few weeks, who fortunately was my friend. Otherwise, he would probably have thrown me out. He patiently checked every time, and every time the diagnosis was, "The tooth is fine." What was wrong with me? I was supposedly eating healthily and was also physically very active, that is, as far as my condition allowed. I also took naturopathic remedies. But nothing helped. I was only 60 years old and felt like a wreck. At the beginning of 2022, I experienced acute digestive problems, severe flatulence and very loose stool several times a day. I had learned that white rice heals the gut, but days of only eating ice didn't help, nor did taking probiotics. I became more and more desperate. Then I stumbled across a YouTube video from Dr. Eric Berg. In it, he talked about pain in the right shoulder and why it can be a symptom of a fatty liver. I knew that drinking too much alcohol could cause a fatty liver, but I hardly drank alcohol. Dr. Berg explained how consuming fructose can cause non-alcoholic fatty liver. Household sugar contains 50% fructose, and it is abundant in many types of fruit and in many supposedly healthy sweeteners such as agave syrup. Fruit juices are also rich in fructose. The liver is the only organ that can process fructose and is therefore quickly overwhelmed. This can lead to a fatty liver. The liver swells and displaces the surrounding tissue, which continues up into the muscles of the right shoulder. The result is right-sided shoulder pain that cannot be relieved by physiotherapy. I found my situation 100% reflected in Dr. Berg's description. I appreciate how Dr. Berg communicates his findings and experiences and backs up many of his statements with scientific studies. So I watched more of his videos. These shook my worldview of nutrition to its core and provided explanations for all the symptoms I was suffering from. In his videos, Dr. Berg explains why a ketogenic diet is the best form of nutrition and how it optimally supports the body's self-healing processes. In my desperate situation, I was ready to give up my 36-year-old perspective and give a new one a chance. Firstly, I had nothing to lose. Secondly, Dr. Berg's explanations were logical. And thirdly, it was an interesting self-experiment. One's own experience has the advantage of complete certainty. Arthur Schopenhauer. The term ketogenic means that the body obtains energy from fat instead of from carbohydrates. The basic formula for the ketogenic diet is very low carbohydrates, moderate protein, high animal fat. This is almost the opposite of how I had been eating for the last 36 years. Carbohydrate-rich foods such as cereals and legumes have been the basis of my diet. From now on, I cut them out completely. No more rice, bread, pasta, beans and lentils, and no carbohydrate-rich vegetables such as potatoes. I also avoided sugar and seed oils such as sunflower oil, canola oil and safflower oil. Only olive oil and avocado oil remained on my menu. I switched to a ketogenic diet from one day to the next. After just 2 days, my digestion was back to normal. I had no more bloating and normal bowel movements. I was impressed. Grains, nuts and seed oils are rich in omega-6 fatty acids, which promote inflammation. As I had been eating mainly these for decades, it was no wonder my body was chronically inflamed. Inflamed and therefore weakened tissue had contributed to both the slipped disc and the hernia, and had delayed the healing process. After a few weeks on a ketogenic diet, all the inflammation had subsided. My liver also recovered as the shoulder pain decreased and eventually disappeared completely. I'm not offering a description of the ketogenic diet here or making any recommendations. I am sharing my personal experience and thoughts. If you are interested in this form of nutrition, you can find information on the internet, get competent advice, or perform your own experiments. In my opinion, Dr. Berg's YouTube channel is a good place to start. I eat red meat, beef, lamb, game, liver, fish, salmon, sardines, mackerel, eggs, beef kidney fat, butter, ghee, cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cabbage, asparagus, avocados, and sauerkraut. I occasionally eat berries, mushrooms, green salads, olive and avocado oil, and raw milk, cheese and yogurt, preferably from sheep's milk. I use a generous amount of salt, pepper and apple cider vinegar as seasonings. I pay meticulous attention to top quality. Organic production alone is not enough for me. Some of the legal guidelines for something to be labeled organic are ridiculous. Organic food should not be produced according to legal guidelines, but according to what is natural. For example, grain is not natural food for cattle nor for fish. Wild fish, wild cattle, wild sheep, etc. do not eat grain. But in organic farming, cattle, fish and other animals are usually fed grain. Since grains are rich in pro-inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids, the meat from these animals not only loses some of its health benefits, but can even become a burden on our health. I have therefore sought out farmers who feed their animals almost exclusively on grass. And I eat only wild-caught fish. As a scientist, I always question everything, including myself. So after 6 months on a ketogenic diet, I did an experiment. I ate a portion of basmati rice with my meat and vegetable dish. A few hours later, I had stomach pains, and the next day I had diarrhea. In my experience, a vegetarian diet made me ill, and an animal-based diet made me well again. Dr. Berg and many others have had similar experiences. So is it true for all people? Below I share 2 of my thoughts on this. Firstly, vegetarian animals such as cattle, sheep and horses eat most of the day. They must, because their food is low in nutrients. Carnivores, such as lions, eat only occasionally. This suffices because their food is rich in nutrients. Carbohydrate-rich foods, such as cereals and legumes, are rich in nutrients, although not as rich and high in quality as animal foods. But they are not an appropriate food for us, or most animals. A carbohydrate-rich diet puts a strain on our bodies. For example, it overstresses the pancreas. It must release excessive amounts of insulin to regulate blood sugar levels, which are thrown out of balance by carbohydrate-rich foods. Snacking between meals exacerbates the situation. Over time, this leads to insulin resistance, which can develop into prediabetes, which can become diabetes. Grains can also inflame the gut. Gluten intolerance and inflammatory gut diseases are evidence. If we eat animal foods with a high fat content, we can easily manage with 1 or 2 meals a day. We don't need snacks in between, and the pancreas has much less work to do. Secondly, many people in India and China eat vegetarian diets. When we see pictures of them, we notice that many are spindly and have hardly any teeth in old age. This reflects my experience after 36 years vegetarianism. This diet weakens us right down to the teeth, which are an indicator of vitality. Much of this only becomes visible with advanced age. Naturally, hunger and appetite would tell us what to eat and when, and how much. But programs that generate over 99% of our actions and thoughts control us. We do and think what we have learned to do and think. We eat what we have learned to eat. We believe what we have learned to believe. That's how I came to be a vegetarian. I have been programmed through books, articles, and training courses. In addition, like-minded people reinforce each other, that is, each other's programs. Therefore, finding the truth is anything but easy. See my articles, Why the Question "What Am I?" is important and magical, and How to Become What You Truly Are in 7 Steps. Another challenge is that many industrially processed foods create addictions, such as the addiction to sugar. Life is lived forward and understood backwards. Today I know from experience. First, books are not sources of truth. A book reflects the author's perspective. When we read and do training courses, we gather information, perspectives, and programs. With own experiments and experiences, we gather knowledge. Second, a vegetarian diet is malnutrition. It can take decades for the effects to become noticeable. Third, a carbohydrate-rich diet promotes inflammation. Fourth, a high-fat, animal-based diet strengthens and heals.